The Book of Remembrance of Moses, the Tablet of Gabriel, Chapter 9. An account of Israel's arrival at the oasis of Midian. The Lord tells Moses what to teach Israel. Mount Jabal receives the new name of Sinai. The original purpose and function of the tabernacle. Instructions of how to take the covenant with regards to the law of Jeshurun. Moses goes upon Sinai to write the covenant. The golden calf and the wickedness of Aaron. Israel becomes permanently divided to follow either Aaron or Moses. Aaron's sons killed. Aaron eats the meat off the altar. Moses cast out and pursued in an attempt to kill him. Anokeesed takes Sinai unto himself, and the mountain is no more. And I saw that the children of Israel were unaccustomed to desert travel, for they had lived and worked for a long time by the river, and had no freedom to travel, and they made bricks of river mud, and tended gardens in the flood plains, and they herded sheep on the land between branches of the river. And it was very hard for them to travel, and they could not sleep in their usual way, and many of them had little to eat. And on the journey the children cried, and the husbands complained, and it was hard for the people. And it came to pass that when they reached the oasis of Midian, they were exhausted. And I beheld them arrive, and it was sad to see and startling to me. For in a desert oasis water is sacred, and in the Midian oasis I saw that the water was in a group of little pools, all grouped together with little isles of vegetation between them. And the water came up from in the ground to form the pools, and it was crystal clear and cool, and sweet indeed to drink it. And desert peoples have a high respect for the water, and they treat it with reverence, even to the point that they will set aside hostilities when different groups come together there to partake of the water. And when the exhausted Israelites arrived, they did not know the ways of the desert, and they treated the water with disrespect. And they jumped into the water with their clothes on and made it muddy. And they trampled down the gardens, scavenging for food. And all the people of Reuel were exceedingly patient with them, and it was terrible. And Reuel wept to see the impact that slavery had on his kindred. And I saw that the Midianites showed compassion in the face of it, and they took care of them as best they could. And I knew that provisions in the desert oasis were very fragile, and used in ways established since ancient times. And by all this Reuel knew the trials that lay ahead for Moses. And in the midst of this I began to see a wonderful thing, for I saw that Moses had built an altar at the place where the burning bush was seen. And Moses and Reuel went there together to ask God what they should do to bless the children of Israel. And the Lord spoke to Reuel, and he said, At the encampment at Mount Jabal, have the old order people give way, and make room for the Israelites, for the time that they are making their covenant with the Lord, and the people there expected it to take the summer season to accomplish it. And at Jabal there resided the largest settlement of the old order Midianites, and the people there left their dwellings and their gardens, and set out to find temporary refuge. And some went to En-gedi, and some to Beersheba, and some to nearby Mount Hor, and some went to Kadesh Barnea. And Israel moved to the mountain settlement to occupy it, and at the altar Reuel renamed the mountain out of his compassion for the people, and he had good expectations for them. And as a priest of the Most High God, he prayed for Israel, and he said, Let this mountain have a new name, that by the worship that is performed here, new life can come to future generations, because of the power of Anokeesed to love in spite of sin. And we shall name it Sinai, because by definition, that name fills the hope of the vision of Israel. Reference number 126. The meaning in Paleo-Hebrew is shown in bold above, which is by the worship that is performed here, new life can come to future generations because of the power of Anokeesed to love in spite of sin. And my heart was very moved to see and know that the mountain was named just for an expression of the love of God for Israel. And it came to pass in the days that followed that Moses went up to his altar at the bush on Sinai, and he said, Lord, I have brought the people here to you, even as many as would come to you here, and they are now in their assembly before you. What is your will for them? And the angel of the presence was there, and he said, Cause the people to cleanse themselves and repent for how they have treated the waters of the oasis of Midian and the people there. And they should repent for the discord in their midst, arising among themselves, and have them reverently wash themselves, and their clothes, and their hair, in the living water that flows down from the mountain. And in 10 days I will come in power when they are assembled before me. And you must teach and prepare them so that they can intelligently decide to enter into a covenant with me, even one of kinship with me, so we can act together as family, I being their father and they being my children. And there are some important instructions they must receive to prepare them to take the covenant. First, teach them to understand and practice going about their lives, being in harmony and accord with the living water, so that the process of reproval, repentance, and forgiveness flows easily between them, and teach them to bind their repentance to their source of forgiveness. And this can only be done through righteousness and their love for me. And second, righteousness for my chosen people lies in their understanding and practice of Shabuah. So they must learn the meaning of covenanting with the Eerkodeshiy, to enter in with them together in rich bonds of affection and to covenant. They should know and understand and practice all 7 of the foundations of Shabuah. And third, they must know to walk in the way of the law of Jeshurun, and they must carefully place the way of their feet on the waymarks of the law every day. And they must know and understand and remember and be able to recite the waymarks to their children in the joys and rich happiness of keeping the law. And lastly, they must learn and practice righteousness in all their ways. For my people are to be a righteous people, and they speak righteousness. And they must live in righteousness. And they are to be empowered over evil through righteousness. And they are to be joined with the hosts of heaven and earth and creation by their righteousness. And you shall teach them how to pray and how to learn holiness, for they are responsible to remember. And let them pray at sunrise to prepare for each new day, and pray at sunset to account to themselves and to me how they live their day. And send those that you can to make amends in confessions and repentance with those of the oasis of Kadesh Barnea. And I will come in power to be with you, as you instruct the people in all these ways. And Jeshurun is the law, and Shabuah is the testimony. And may every one of them walk in reverence as they approach to enter into the covenant in the days to come. And it came to pass that all was done in preparation during the 10 days. And on the 8th day, the mountain on the top began to show smoke, and fire came out of the mountain, and the earth shook, and the people were afraid. But Moses encouraged them, and he told them that the mountain was excited at the prospect of their entering into a covenant of kinship with it and Anokeesed. And we know that mountains carry the burden of the Lord as their righteous definition. And in this case, the mountain had been carrying his burden for his people in captivity in Egypt for a long time. And Moses told them that the mountain would not hurt them. And on the 11th day, all the Israelites assembled themselves on the western side of the Mount Sinai, just between their settlement and the mountain, and at the place where the stream ran into their place of water, on its way to a pool near where their gardens were. And the power of the presence of Anokeesed was felt by them all. And the angel of the presence that spoke from the bush walked with Moses. And the wind blew the smoke from the mountain down, and it cascaded over the people, announcing the presence of Anokeesed. And then the wind changed, and the smoke lifted up into the heights like an invitation to come to the Lord. And every person heard the words, I am the God of your fathers, even of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am Anokeesed. And many fell down astonished and could not stand. And it seemed to me that the Lord made this announcement because in his knowing he knew that many would choose not to walk in the way once the day had passed, that the covenant was presented to them, and the strength of the Spirit the people felt was such that nothing more could be done on that day. And not one person could deny what they heard Anokeesed say. And in the days ahead, Moses taught the people every day, and he taught them according to the instructions he had received, beginning with the living water and on into righteousness, and he taught the people for 30 days. And his teachings were hard for some to comprehend because they had not set their minds on heavenly things, during their time in Egypt, but for those whose thoughts rose above their menial labor there, the teachings of Moses were borne witness to by the Spirit, and their lives were forever changed. And many a doubting heart found, for the first time in this pilgrimage, a strong assurance that they did indeed do the right thing, to come out of Egypt, and the realization of what it meant to be of the house of Israel began to come to them. And it is hard to put it into words, but I could feel what it meant to them to know for the first time that they each one were loved by their God, and the worth of their souls compared to what they felt in their slavery could not be torn loose from their hearts ever again. And these, in the house of Israel, from that day on walked with dignity, and they loved Moses, and truly rejoiced with their gift of life. And voices were heard in the night as the people spoke together about what Moses taught them that day, and a deep understanding began to grow in their hearts. But for others, they did not hear what they wanted Moses to say, and they said they were tired of being slaves, and that the covenant of Abraham could not keep them from falling into the hands of those who would seek to dominate them. And so they said they must bear arms, and they could not prosper if they did not have slaves. And besides, now it was their turn to be a nation of masters, and they claimed that they were destined to be masters because they were superior in their intelligence and in their moral standing and in their ability to conduct commerce. For had they not made the Egyptians rich and powerful with their labors? And it came to pass that Moses heard these murmurings and also the exclamations of joy at the prospect of becoming a holy nation for Anokeesed, and he turned his compassion toward those who doubted his course. And Moses went upon the mountain up to his altar of the bush, and he asked the Lord what he may do to help them to overcome the effects of sin and slavery. And the compassion in the heart of the angel of the presence mingled with the heart of Moses, and the two of them as brothers decided what could be done to bless their fellows in their holy nation. And my eyes were open, and I began to understand why the powers of evil were so intent to overcome and destroy that which the Lord and Moses determined to be the way the people could be blessed. And I saw that the Lord showed Moses the meaning of the tabernacle and the healing effect it could have on the people, to strengthen them and allow them to sustain a continual state of holiness. And he showed him how it could be the means for every one of them coming to know the Lord for themselves. And the tabernacle was where people could go privately, each one or in families, to meet with the Lord and keep their lives pure through their repentance, so they could be strongly walking in the way and bring stability to their ability to live out their covenant. And the words of Jeremiah came to mind, where he said, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them, saith the Lord. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days with the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts, and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more, thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever." And thus we see why evil is so intent in keeping the law obscure and complicated and harsh, because if it is not written in the hearts of the people and sustained in their daily worship, then there would be no way for them to sustain their holy nation to continue to exist. And so we see that the tabernacle was established as an act of compassion, to keep at bay the effects of slavery and wickedness. The world has enslaved many with the bondage of sin, and I know that Ariel and the inhabitants of Shakath were there listening, and they determined to not let up with their evil plans until the tabernacle was removed or transformed into a temple. like all the heathen nations have. And so my eyes were open to just what the Lord intended tabernacles to do, and that was to help his people to overcome the influences of slavery and the impurities of the world and the corruptions of their hearts from the lack of virtue by daily intimate counsel with Anokeesed. And the Lord showed Moses the tabernacle and let him see what one for all the people would look like and how to use it, and that there could be a sacred place where they could rest with their father Anokeesed and find healing for their souls. And there were too many people for there to be just one for all of them, and each family may have one for their own use, but the one for the many would hold the ark containing the tablets, and it would be used for more serious matters before the Lord. And I saw that they made several small tabernacles, and some grew in the Lord, and others complained and wanted to worship like the other nations do. And thus the divisions continued even in the midst of Moses' teaching and before the smoke of the mountain. And it came to pass that Moses taught for a full 30 days with all his strength. And he spoke the covenant into their ears, and he rehearsed it to them line by line. And he said, Thus saith the Lord, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. Reference number 127. Exodus chapter 19, verse 4 through 6. And I heard how one must enter in to make the covenant, and I now realize that we can enter into the covenant in a more purposeful way. Number 1. First, the preamble was read, reference number 128. In our case, it would be our written covenant read aloud. And Moses read what is quoted above. Then they divided into groups of 50, and they each one affirmed their determination to ever seek. Number 2, to keep the great commandment. Number 3, and the second one that is like unto it. Number 4, then they each one affirmed their solemn intention to keep each foundation of Shabuah, so their life would hold the testimony of a full and fulfilled gift of life. And they started at the first foundation of Shabuah on to the last one, simply stating what each one is and their promise to keep it. Number 5, and then they would cite each waymark and express their commitment to have their feet walk in the way of each one, starting at the first waymark and on to the 12th one. Number 6, and each person would promise to embrace the Eerkodeshiy and abandon the Decadarchiy in a prompt and orderly manner according to the urgency of the times, and to shun all of any dark forces or strange religions that do not represent Anokeesed in his infinite loving kindness. Number 7, and lastly, those of the holy order would stand before Anokeesed and pledge to always come to his aid and lead the people to intervene with their agencies to answer the call of Motzah the Lamb for both salvation and redemption, and they promised to only and always follow the exact leadings of the Lord in all these matters. And all the people knew the seriousness of such a lifelong covenant never to be broken, and the rocks and Anokeesed will remember, and the mountains will rejoice. And it came to pass that after they entered into the covenant and said they would solemnly do all the Lord had said, the Lord called Moses up upon the mountain so he could write the covenant upon a stone tablet. And it was so the people could always remember the covenant to do it faithfully. And the Lord said that it must be written on a stone that would be their rock of witness. And so Moses left all those who had newly been taught all the precepts of the law and the testimony, and who had covenanted to do all the Lord asked of them. And he went there for 40 days. And it was also for him to affirm his calling to the holy order, seeing that so many were critical of him and had many accusations. And the mountain quieted down, but continued to smoke, and Moses was unafraid. And he camped at his altar of the bush, and the people could see him up there as they approached the mountain. And all who saw him would report to the rest of the people. And in this way many prayed for him, and Reuel and many of the Midianites entered into the covenant to follow in the covenant of their father Abraham. And the powers of darkness overshadowed Moses while he was on the mountain, because he was viewed as an enemy to all those who dwelt in Shakath. And they greatly feared the firm establishment of the pathway back to Eden, because it would result in the loss of everything they desired, and they were angry at him for bringing the testimony of Edah in Shabuah. And it came to pass that Moses called upon the name of the Lord in his despair, and he was able to rise above the forces of darkness. And the angel of the presence spoke with him face to face, as he had done so often with our holy ancient ancestors. And I saw Moses take a sharp glassy stone and carve the covenant tablet, and it had on it both the law and the testimony, or that is to say, both the 7 foundations of Shabuah and the 12 waymarks of Jeshurun. And it had on it the covenant Motzah made with his father as the creator of our earth. And it was the same tablet that the Lord wrote upon to instruct John the Revelator. And he carved the guidance tablet with the 10 guidances on it, and I have never seen just how he obtained it, but he could have had the Urim with him, and with it brought forth the guidance tablet. And in this way Moses and the Lord together were triumphant. And it came to pass that on his 38th day the Lord woke him up with an urgent message, and it was in the night, just before what would have been a bright Sabbath morning. And the Lord was in much distress, and he said, O Moses, the people have already corrupted themselves. And Moses said, O Lord, how is that so? I taught them carefully in all the ways you have instructed me, and they in all their assemblies have agreed to keep the covenant. What could have corrupted them? And in his sorrow the Lord opened up a vision before the eyes of Moses, and Moses saw an old man lying on a bed, and it was Jacob. And Jacob was speaking to those of his children who were gathered about him, and he was informing them as to what would befall them at the end of their time to sojourn in Egypt. And Moses listened intently, and he heard the words Jacob spoke. And when he spoke of Levi and Simeon, Moses was startled at what he heard. And Jacob said, reference number 129. This reading can also be found in Genesis, chapter 49, verse 5 through 7, with a somewhat clearer version found in the DSS 4Q, Genesis, chapter 49, verse 6 through 8, page 22 of the DSS Bible by Abegg, Flint, and Ulrich, 1999. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. Let not my soul come into their council. Let not my glory be united with their assembly. For in their anger they killed a man, and with their self-will they desecrated the pathway of Jeshurun. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and cursed be their wrath, for it was cruel. Reference number 130. This is referring to the incident when they slew only Shechem. I will divide them from my house and scatter them from the people of Israel. And then Moses understood that their offspring was banned from taking any role in leading the people out of Egypt. And after they became a holy nation, they were to follow the lead of those Anokeesed called upon to act in his service. And after witnessing these astonishing words of Jacob, Moses said to the Lord, O Lord, my brother Aaron is a Levite. And the Lord said, you have rightly spoken. And then Moses and the Lord wept together. And it came to pass that Moses went down from the mountain and repented, and he forbid Aaron to act in any capacity of leadership, and that he must not use the altar of all the people at the tabernacle of the congregation. And I will now cite that which has been written concerning this matter. Reference number 131. First Kahee, chapter 4, verses 93 through 98. And Moses went down from the mountain with the ark in his hand, and as he drew near, he could hear the shouts and the laughter coming from the camp. And it was on the Sabbath day, and he wept. And as he drew near, he could see that the people were worshiping an image of the god of the king, Hapi, the golden calf. And Moses exclaimed to one standing by, from whence comes this idol? And they said, Aaron caused that the people should borrow gold from their fellows before they fled the land of the king. And Moses wept. He fell down on his knees, and the ark was dropped, and it fell open, and the tablets spilled out into the dust. And he dashed the tablets upon a stone for the overflowing grief of his heart. And he exclaimed, O God, how can I place such holy things before the face of those who worship idols? You, O Lord, have overcome and subdued the river god Hapi before their eyes, and yet they are so quickly turned unto it. About this time the people beheld Moses that he was come, and they all stood still and were silent before him. And Moses said, Who does make idols in your midst? And they answered, Aaron. And Moses said, Where is Aaron the idol maker? Reference number 194. See Wise, Abeg and Cook. Cite page 61 and page 280 for the word Aaronite used in a derogatory way in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Council of Aaronites is probably referring to the Sanhedrin. And Aaron said, Here am I. And Moses said, You are the one who has been set apart and established as a priest before God, and you make idols. These people have had the Lord establish his tabernacle in their midst, and all their worship is in place. And now they pray to Hapi on the Sabbath. And Aaron answered him not a word. And Moses said, Grind your idol to powder and scatter it abroad on the north side of the camp. And Moses went out and called upon the Lord, and Moses asked God to forgive Aaron, but the Lord would not. And the Lord declared unto Moses that Aaron was not repentant, and that mischief yet remained in his heart. And Moses went down from the Lord, and he declared unto all the people, even to as many as were able to understand the language of the king, that Aaron and all the sons of his lineage after him could not sprinkle the element of cleansing upon the unclean for purification on the Sabbath for all their generations, because he had polluted the Sabbath with his idols. And it came to pass that Aaron was wroth, and he worked the works of deceit, and he would pretend to have spoken unto Moses and bring back a report. And this man Aaron would also pretend unto the high priesthood, and he imagined clothing of finery and gold for the ark of the covenant, and much stature and wealth for himself and his sons after him, and he transformed the tabernacle of Moses. And thus did Aaron the idol maker pervert in the eyes of the people the doings of God as to the priesthood, after the manner of the holy order. For has God not said that he himself would herald unto man their calling according to his will, and that such callings came not by the will of man, nor were they called because of father or mother? Therefore Aaron sought to establish that now the high priesthood was to come by the blood of lineage. Reference number 132, end quote. And I always considered it prudent to quote something when the Lord says, according to that which has been written. And I saw Moses direct the man who had assisted Aaron to mold and form the idol, to melt it down to be molten. And the idol was small to fit in the palm of the hand. And Moses threw the molten gold out broadly unto the sand, and then they collected the sand and ground it up between two stones to be like powder. And Moses cast it into the stream that ran down from the mountain on the north side, the north being the direction in righteousness, indicating the complete end of a cycle. And the powder fell into a place where the water ran over rocks, and the sand disappeared there, never to be found again. And it came to pass that some of the people were angry, that Aaron was forbidden any exercise of leadership. And Aaron was a big man, and carried himself with authority. And some of the people were relieved, because the manner of the behavior of Aaron was sometimes troubling to them, and he seemed arrogant. And it came to pass that the divisions among the people grew to become more pronounced, and positions of dispute became more firmly expressed, but Moses was not shaken, and he held firm in his determination for the people to stand pure before Anokeesed, and to worship only the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses had a repentant heart in the face of the complaints of the people, and he grieved, and wept before the Lord over the sins of the people, and he repented that he had broken the tablets in his despair. And he thought, O Lord, I wish I had been more patient. Now what shall I do? And the Lord said to him, Hew out 2 more tablet pieces like you did the first time, and bring them up unto me on the mount, and I will show you how to write the covenant tablet again, in just the same way. But this time the tablet will be written to show that I will not send the holy order before those who have so soon broken the covenant. And I will not send the holy order to go before them, for they will surely continue to corrupt themselves before me by serving the gods of the nations. And then Moses prepared 2 more stones to be tablets, and I saw that they were small in his hand, to be about the size of a flat part of the hand of a man. And they were thin, about the thickness of his little finger, and the stone was dark gray and soft enough to carve. And Moses took them and went up the mountain to stand before the Lord at the altar of the bush. And it came to pass that he carved out the writings on the tablets in the very same way, except this time the bottom side of the crossbar on the salvation side was not swelled up to indicate those who do not seek to live out their visions of created purpose will not have the holy order to follow among them. And this was because those who followed after Aaron were a stiff-necked people. Notwithstanding, they had received the same witness of the Spirit as the others, when they were taught from on high, at the day when the mountains started smoking. And they also were diligently taught for 30 days by Moses, and every one of them knew in their hearts that they had been taught in the presence of Anokeesed. And they had agreed to all the words they had heard, and they had agreed that they would walk by all the precepts that were set before them. And they entered into the covenant, and yet in spite of all this they remained fixed in their positions of disrespect for the ways of their father Abraham. And when Moses came down from the mount the second time and explained how the tablet was now written to express the division between them, no person on either side celebrated, and the camp became very somber. And I saw that in the eyes of the Lord, that now with this alteration the covenant tablet expressed a clear signal that the divisions among the people of Israel were to be seen to be permanent in the times ahead. And thus the tablet prophesied that in Israel there would always be those who would follow the law and the ways of their father Abraham, and those who would adapt to the heathen practices of the nations. And none of us had ever viewed the tablet in this light. And this distinction will follow Israel, and there will come to be both a tabernacle unto the Lord and a temple unto Moloch in Israel. And some will have priests who serve darkness, and some will have the holy order. And I know that all the prophets to be sent by the Lord to Israel will speak against the temple with its burnt offerings and sacrifices, and they will uphold and speak out firmly for the law of Jeshurun, and Moses is the king of Jeshurun. And this is how this division came to be expressed during their time at Sinai. The ones who were the most adamant against Moses held the view that in order to become a nation, they had to be prepared to arm themselves and fight to prevail over nations, so they never could again become slaves or be brought into captivity. And they thought the ways of Abraham did not result in their being a nation, and thus was because he was weak and walked gently upon the land and among the people. And they said, if Abraham had taken the land by force, we never would have had to go into Egypt to become a holy nation. But he took a position of weakness, and we will not follow his ways. Reference number 133. In reality, they went to Egypt precisely because Levi and Simeon broke the covenant of Abraham by taking up arms. And as I looked with Urim, I could feel that they had been the ones among the Hebrews who had practiced the religions of the nations while in Egypt, even the religions who knew not Anokeesed. And I felt that when Levi and Simeon walked out in their anger at the last words of reproof of their father as he lay dying, they departed away from their children, ever having any knowledge of the God of their fathers. And in this way, these 2 men destined their families and all their future generations to be drawn to worship the gods of the nations. My, how things would have been different if they had fallen down on their knees before their father and repented for their anger and cruelty. But alas, it was not so. And Aaron himself was such a one who took on the practices of the heathen gods of the nations. And from the beginning he communicated to the people that it was the religions of the nations that brought them their power and prosperity, and that they must have decisive victory over their foes if they were to endure as a nation. And he was the one who had instructed the people at their first Passover to put blood on their doorposts and to stand ready with staff in hand all night when the angel of death passed over to kill the firstborn children. And the instructions of Moses never did reach all the people, but to those who understood him, the night of Passover he instructed them to act after the ancient ways, and they were to sleep with Anokeesed all night, in peace and tranquility, as the angels of life called the Eerkodeshiy passed over to protect our first parents, and to allay their fears. And from the beginning, Passover was called the Day of Tranquility, and it was established to remind the people of their faith in the watch care of Anokeesed. And it would have been a great comfort to Israel to know that the evil prayers of the Egyptians to kill the children would have no effect on them. And in this way I saw that Passover became the first holy day to be corrupted before they even left Egypt. And thus we see that very early on the divisions among some of the people showed forth a position against the religion of the ancients. And such corruption is contrary to the pathway back to Eden. And these divisions became very deep and serious, and Anokeesed grieved over his children. And it came to pass that I saw that all this took place within 2 years after they left Egypt and arrived at Sinai. And during this time the disputes multiplied, and Moses spent most of his time settling them with just decisions, always supporting the covenant and the law of Jeshurun. And Reuel saw that Moses was wearing away. And his family suffered for his much absence, and his children were pained of soul by the hatred that came to him from some of the people. And it came to pass that Reuel had Moses gathered the men together to see what could be done to ease the burdens of Moses. And Eleazar his son and Joshua were there, and Reuel purposed that they select 12 men of good repute, who were fair and wise, and who walked in the way of Abraham, to set themselves apart in order to address the task of judgment between the people and between the two sides of opinion regarding the covenant. And Reuel outlined the way they should behave with honesty and upright intent in all their ways, and a meal was prepared with such as they had of barley, and from the flocks of Kadesh Barnea. And Reuel made a covenant with them, and it was affirmed with a meal in the customary way in righteousness. And the covenant was that they would select 12 men who would constitute a council. And this council would in latter times be greatly enlarged, to become known as the Sanhedrin by the temple religion. And in this way Moses was replaced in his duties over the people. And you will see that this establishment of 12 men will carry over into the other 2 flames. And the people continued to complain about Moses, saying that it was not fair that their judges should only be those who looked with favor on the ways of the covenant of Abraham. And Moses cried out to the Lord to ask for some relief from the persecutions, and the Lord said, "Assemble the same group of men, and I will put my spirit upon them that I have covered you with, and they will be responsible to lead the people, according to my word to them as it has been with you." And Moses did so. And it could be seen that it was important for only those who affirmed the covenant of Abraham to be the ones who were called to do it. For the Lord could not have put his spirit upon the others in the same degree. Reference number 134. At this time, Moses left Sinai and returned to Kadesh Barnea to live with his family. And it came to pass in those days that it became apparent that the people had overstayed their welcome with the Midianites, who had so graciously given up their homes and dwelling places for them. And there were too many Israelites for the desert land to support. And the pressure began to grow in their families, and something had to be done. And during this time, every family had a tabernacle, and the people shared them with others. And there was also a tabernacle that Moses had made for the whole congregation. And it was without the camp for privacy, and it was a little ways over a hill where it could not be seen. And this tabernacle held the ark of the covenant. and anyone could use their tabernacle as a family to prepare to take the covenant, or when they had a special need and they sought the Lord. But the tabernacle of the congregation was only to be used in behalf of all the congregation, and Moses was looked to for guidance every time it was used, and most of the time he presided there. And like all the others, Aaron had his own tabernacle for his family, and he envied to use the one that was for all the people, for he did not give up his desire to be a man in the holy order, and in this thing he went directly against the covenant tablet as the tablet was written. For the Lord said that this order does not come by the will of man, and he went against the words of his father Jacob to the offspring of Levi. And many people urged him to act in this manner and to follow his path in order to find dominance over their fellows, and they were rebellious. And this was about at the end of their second year at Sinai. And it came to pass that near the beginning of that next year, Aaron and his sons began to use the tabernacle of the congregation. And his sons had just gone through a 28-day purification in their family's tabernacle to be consecrated as priests. And they had been ordained the day before when they first came to use the tabernacle of the congregation. Reference number 135. See Abingdon's commentary, 1929, page 285, and read also Exodus chapter 6, verse 23. And it came to pass that on a clear spring day, Moses received word of what was going to transpire at the tabernacle of the congregation, and it was also a Sabbath day when he arrived, and I am sure Aaron intended to use a Sabbath for his purposes. And Moses went out to see what Aaron would do, and he beheld that Aaron had corrupted the tabernacle by building an altar of sacrifice and burnt offerings. And when I saw this, my mind immediately recalled what Jeremiah wrote, and he said, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, scatter your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices, and eat flesh. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this thing commanded I them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your God, and ye shall be my people. And walk ye in all the ways that I have commanded you, that it may be well unto you. Reference number 136. For my substitution of the word put, in verse 21, see Strong's number 5595. For the real meaning of the word put, Strong's number 5595, safah, to scatter, remove, ruin. The word put in the Bible is translated from 51 words by my count, and the word put is used in the Bible some 880 times. In this verse, Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 21, it is the only time number 5595 is used to mean put. This indicates that there has been an effort to obscure Jeremiah's real meaning. And so it can be seen that Aaron established the tabernacle altar to be used like all the heathen nations use altars, and this act prepared the way that in the future the tabernacle could be easily substituted for a tabernacle of Moloch. Reference number 137. Read Acts chapter 7, verses 42 through 47. And Moses established the tabernacle to be in the likeness of a shepherd's hut. Reference number 138. Strong's number 4908, a shepherd's hut. And there was only an altar of incense, and a table for the bread of the presence, and a menorah, so people could light the 7 candles to seven themselves with the covenant. And it came to pass that Moses arrived quietly, and he watched from a ways off to see what Aaron would do. And Moses heard the prayers and incantations of Aaron, and he plainly heard that the intentions of Aaron in his sacrifices were to replace the covenant of Abraham and give rise to an expression of the religions of the nations. And he did this to please those who would be a nation like all the other nations, and to make a way that would be more suitable for them to become a strong nation with dominance over other nations. And his supporters were urging him on in this pursuit. And they were gathered around to see both Aaron and his sons perform this, and they intended to protect Aaron should Moses and his supporters come upon them. And Aaron put a strange fire upon the altar he had made, and it was one not seen in the encampment since the beginning of their departure from Egypt. And he used wood which Anokeesed had asked Abraham not to use. And Aaron had not repented to let go of his desires that his family through his sons would have perpetual priesthood in the holy order, going down from the oldest to the youngest. And it happened just a few moments after Moses arrived that a stone on the altar of Aaron burst asunder loudly, and pieces of the rock struck both Nadab and Abihu, and killed them both instantly. And all the congregation present was aghast and stood still. Reference number 139. Read Leviticus chapter 10. And Moses stepped forward and commanded Aaron, and he said, "If you are going to do as the nations do, then you must continue in what you are doing. Do not stop and take time to tend to your slain sons, lest you die." And relatives who supported Aaron took the dead bodies out away from the altar, and Aaron had to continue what he was doing. And Aaron was dumbfounded and did not know what to do or say before all the people. And a crowd had gathered at the sound of the loud explosion of the bursting stone. And Moses stood by listening, and he stood still and was seen now to be one of great authority. And he insisted Aaron continue in full view of all the people. And many strong men were there, and they stood by Moses to support him. And in this moment, Moses knew what to do, and he acted decisively in behalf of Anokeesed, because he knew that all that Anokeesed desired for his people Israel was come under dire threat of being destroyed by these acts of Aaron and the covenant and the mission of Israel as a people to be emissaries of loving kindness to the nations hung in the balance. And the attendants of Aaron fled from before him, and only Aaron and Eleazar remained. And Eleazar did not know what to do, but he was compelled to act in his role in the absence of his two brothers. And I saw Moses do an extraordinary thing, for he commanded Aaron and Eleazar to eat the meat from off the altar that was burnt by the fire that killed the two men. And Aaron and Eleazar did so before all the congregation. And everyone knew well that this act was a powerful element of righteousness, to see that Aaron and Eleazar could never again officiate before an altar of the people during all the remainder of their lives. And a shudder went through the people as they witnessed these things. And the surety of this act by Moses could not be undone. And if you look, you will see that King Josiah did much the same thing when he burnt the bones of the ancestors of the wayward in Israel upon their altars. And in this way he caused them to abandon their altars altogether. Reference number 140. 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 10, 16, and 20. And upon seeing this profound act, the entire camp fell into an uproar, and Moses had to be escorted away to safety. And the people, each one, began to dispute with their neighbor. And in the days that followed, the people moved their tents and dwellings to show which side they were on, and the whole camp was divided. Reference number 141. It may be of particular interest to someone that when the Israelites emerged from crossing the sea, that Hammurabi had securely put in place 12 curses aimed specifically at each of the 12 waymarks of the law of Jeshurun. See the Babylonian Laws, Volume 2, page 95 through 107, by Driver and Miles. And they were directed at national leaders. This reflects heavily on the permanent division of Israel that has engulfed the ensuing millennia. I know we do not have a fly in here. Where did the damn fly come from? I rebuke you. And the supporters of Aaron were camped over against Sinai, and the supporters of Moses were camped at the tabernacle of the congregation to protect it and to dismantle the altar of Aaron But the tabernacle could never be used again, and they had to make a new one, because it was now corrupted with the spirit of death. And Moses was distraught, and at this time his family was at Kadesh Barnea. And Moses did not want to leave the people, for the whole camp was in mourning for 7 days. And the people of the covenant prayed earnest prayers for the family and people of Aaron, and compassion flowed out of the law of Jeshurun. And Moses dared not go out for water himself, nor go out alone away from the camp by the tabernacle. But one day the people of Aaron had been watching for their chance to catch Moses, and they came upon Moses when he was by himself, and they rushed at him and began to throw rocks at him and to chase him. And I see Moses running as fast as he can, and he took off his outer garment that came almost to the ground, and he put it over his arm, and he is running for his life. And as I beheld this awful moment, I was afraid that if Moses fell down, the people would kill him. And when looking with Urim, my whole soul is caught up in what I see. And I said a prayer in my mind, and I said, "Oh Lord, please don't let him fall down." And who knows, maybe my prayers were there with him when it happened. And Moses was very fast, and he escaped them over toward Kadesh Barnea. And I saw that he was hit a few times, and I thought upon his bruises, and I wept before the scribes because I love Moses. And as I see Moses running, I began to realize that he was injured, and he had 40 miles to go to reach his place of safety. And 2 young men heard the shouts, and they followed along and helped him. And Moses rested and went home to the oasis to find his wife. And they had to tend to his injuries on the way home. And when they arrived there, Zipporah and her sisters tended to his injuries, and they knew which healing herbs to bind to his wounds. And when they were done, they left him to rest and sleep. And Reuel posted watchmen to stand to see if any would come to hurt Moses further or bring contention to their settlement. And Reuel prayed fervent prayers over Moses like a father would. And it came to pass that Moses awoke in the night, and he was alone, and he was very sorrowful. And he had compassion on Anokeesed, because all that was ever on his heart during the exodus from Egypt was motivated with the hope that Anokeesed would obtain the desires of his heart, to have Israel become a holy nation at long last. And Moses said, "O Lord, is all we have done now going to come to nothing?" And I saw Moses rock back and forth on his knees in his grieving. And in the morning, those who attended to Moses reported to Eliezer that his father would not eat, for he was mourning greatly. And they heard him say, "All is lost, O Lord." And Eliezer loved his father dearly, and their souls were joined together. And in his heart he wished that they had tried to stone him instead of his father. And he gently touched his father on his shoulder and said, "Father, all is not lost." And Moses raised up to look at him, and Eliezer said, "Father, I covenant with you here and now, that during all my days I will always keep the law and walk every step on the pathway back to Eden. And no matter what comes, I will not turn aside, but I will be ever faithful for Anokeesed. And Father, many people are even now flowing into this encampment to be with you." And Moses did not respond. And he said again, "Father, a multitude that left Sinai to be with you are gathered outside to demonstrate their determination to walk in the way of the law. And they all love Abraham." And Moses arose and went haughtily out to sea, and he beheld the people, and the people rejoiced to see him, and that he was going to be all right. And at this same time, all those at Sinai who supported Moses left to go to Kadesh Barnea. And the others at Sinai were leaving also, and they started northward, intending to go to a mountain named Hor. And the group following Aaron had not gone far when Sinai erupted and blew to pieces. And Aaron and his sisters were among the last to leave, and they were compelled to hasten, because the mountain was shaking all over, and they were frightened at the shaking of the earth. And they were yet too close to the mountain to be safe when it burst forth. And Miriam was killed, and I saw that she was mostly buried by what fell from the sky. And Aaron was severely injured, and it seemed he had no use of his legs, and I saw them carrying him. And the sky was dark as if it was night, with dust and dirt and smoke and rocks and clouds of steam billowing out of the earth. And all of that rose up to fill the lofty places to block out the sun. And some who perished were never found again, but they found Miriam, and they brought her back to Kadesh Barnea. And those who brought her began to repent earnestly, and they then stayed with Moses. And Moses loved his sister, and those who brought her gave Moses an account of all that had happened, and of the mountain bursting in great fury, and some who were thought to be lost were later found. And Moses mourned for his sister, and they buried her in Kadesh Barnea, and her family was not there to be with her. And in the ensuing days, when the air settled, Sinai was no more. And the Lord said to me, Anokeesed has taken Sinai unto himself, so that no man can desecrate her forevermore. And every place where Moses walked on Sinai is gone from the earth. And I beheld with a vast circle of the remaining rim of the bottom edge of the mountain, and the entire mountain was taken, and the Midianites who so graciously gave room for the Hebrews and vacated their homes and land for them, so they could use the mountain to make their covenant with Anokeesed, had no more place there, and they had no home to come back to, and there was no more stream running down, which gave the mountain its name of Jabal. And after those days the Hebrews named Sinai Mount Horeb, reference number 142. See Strong's number 2722, desolation. Because it is now the mountain of destruction, and the Midianites named it Bir Resizim, which means the inhabitants of the pit blew the mountain to pieces. And I might add that it seemed to me that the mountain did not erupt like I would think of a volcano, but it seemed to me when viewing these things that it was a steam explosion and there was fire and smoke, but it did not seem to act the same way. And I saw that the mountain was covered with big trees indicating water. And so the mountain was only named Sinai for about 3 years, and it is a mountain that was and now is not, and it has 4 names. And with the complete destruction of Sinai, the news of it traveled far and wide, and people came to look at the remains of it. And it had always been the largest thing on the horizon for miles around in every direction, and now it is gone. This concludes the Book of Remembrance of Moses, the Tablet of Gabriel, Chapter 9. Shalom, family.